I'd like to begin with a virtual land acknowledgement, everything being somewhat virtual these days. PPF headquarters is located in Ottawa on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. And wherever you may be, I'd ask you to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples on the land on which you're standing on, and we at PPF and on behalf of all of you extend our respects to all First Nations, Inuit and Métis peoples for their valuable past and present contributions to this land we call Canada. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility as individuals and as part of PPF to improving relations among nations and to collaborating in a spirit of reconciliation. So today's event is being recorded and will be shared on our social media platforms. If you want to see yourself again or see any part of this again or show it to other people, and as well, we are live streaming today's event on Facebook. So before we begin, let me take a moment to express my appreciation to our partners. A big thank you to our lead partner, TD Bank Group, and thanks go as well to our supporting partners, BNI, Dalhousie University, Government of Nova Scotia, and National Public Relations. This is an important event for us to be able to celebrate success in a region that has been working so hard to create opportunity for its people, and one that has set itself apart in dealing successfully with the global pandemic. A little later, you'll be hearing about the next chapter in a well-established Atlantic success story as we learn about from the principals themselves about the historic Mi'kmaq Clearwater deal that has closed this year in 2021. And for the first time, the two main principals involved in that historic deal will sit down together to provide some insights into how this came about and what it all means. We are also delighted today to have with us Premier Stephen McNeil, still Premier of Nova Scotia, and he will be saying a few words, I'm sure, unconstrained by the need to get reelected. So who knows what he might say, and we look forward to that. We will then be joined by our host today, Karina LeBlanc, who is a PPF board member and executive director of the Pont d'Espondé Center in New Brunswick. Now, before we begin all of that, I'd like to welcome David and Bill Meuse, Membertou Cultural Ambassadors, for an honor song. David and Bill.
Welcome you. We're honored.
Hey, thank you, David and Bill. That's an incredible welcome. I think you got everybody's blood flowing and energy going. So thank you so much. That was extraordinary. So let me just begin with an introduction, this next part with an introduction to Stephen McNeil. There is never an easy time to extract oneself from government or politics. Usually they leave you before you leave them. But the best exits are certainly those that you can control. And I guess you can just ask the person after whom our Atlantic Awards are named, who stepped down, as he said he would, exactly 10 years after assuming office and having never lost an election. A few politicians can speak to, but Stephen McNeil can as well. Except that in this digital age, what used to be 10 years now happens in 7 years because everything's really compressed. Stephen McNeil has spent 17 years in the Nova Scotia legislature, 14 as leader of the Provincial Liberal Party, and then those 7 years as Premier of Nova Scotia. PPF is glad to, very pleased to have Premier McNeil make our event part of his farewell tour. So it's true, though, that he didn't invite us at this particular moment to the province. When we said that we wanted to set up shop, he said, "Stay the Blazes home." And so we're doing this virtually today. PPF has enjoyed our meetings and dealings in past with the Premier, and we've been impressed with the quiet and firm resolve and common sense we've witnessed in his dealings with the pandemic and other issues he's faced. In a few short days, he will embark on his next adventure, unknown to us at this point, perhaps unknown to him at this point. But first, we're delighted to hear from him today as he reflects on his remarkable political career and these remarkable times we find ourselves in. Premier McNeil.
Thank you, Edward. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with all of you. Really, it's unprecedented time, not only because of the pandemic, but quite frankly, about the deal between Clearwater and the Mi'kmaq Nation of Nova Scotia. That truly is really transformational in many ways, not only for the Mi'kmaq community, but I believe for the country. John and his team built an extraordinary global company. When you think about the beginnings, and I'm sure John will talk about that, to where it ended up being in a few decades, it really has bred confidence. And I would hope it has bred confidence into Atlantic Canadian entrepreneurs that you can do anything on the East Coast of Canada and you compete in a global marketplace. And the fact that this deal now has been put together with Chief Terry Paul and his team. Chief Terry, I've always expressed my admiration for you, who recognize that the best thing that we can do for anyone is create economic success, create job opportunities and skill transfer. And when I spoke to you and Ian earlier, Ian Smith, who will be part of your transformation with the new Clearwater deal, one of the things that quite frankly warmed my heart was not only were you going to continue on the path that Clearwater had set to become a global company, exporting our great seafood product and doing it from here in Nova Scotia and the East Coast of Canada, but you were actually going to make sure that the Mi'kmaq Nation not only were on the decks of the boats, they were going to be in the boardrooms and everywhere in between and transferring that skill. And I think that's extremely important and critical. We will focus, and you may focus on the numbers, whether it's the quantity of product you move or the quantity of the dollars that was associated with this deal. But the transformational part for us will be, in my view, the skill transfer. And I'm looking forward to seeing young Mi'kmaq becoming leaders, not only in the Clearwater deal, but quite frankly in the business community. And Chief Terry, you've done an outstanding job of continuing to focus your community on the economic success, which I think is translated and spread out to other Mi'kmaq communities and to ours. And I can tell you in 2013, it was a priority of our governance and mine that we continue to build on the exporting opportunities that were here. John and other business leaders demonstrated that you can do anything from Atlantic Canada, but for me, in order for us to really grow, we needed to make sure that we got our world-class products into the world market. I say this in December of 2013. I was elected in October, and in December I could go in the market. I could go in the grocery store parking lot and buy lobster for less than $5 a pound. I'm proud to say, John, that's not possible today, and that's because we joined you and other seafood companies out in the global marketplace to demand, quite frankly, the price of this world-class product, and we're starting to receive it, and that is being spread around communities across the province. The thing that exporting does for us, and Laura will talk about this today, and John is an expert at it, but the thing that exporting has done for us in this region, brought back much needed capital, quite frankly, to reinvest it back into our communities, and predominantly, much of that investment is happening in rural coastal communities. Young people are seeing a future for themselves, and I'm really proud of the fact that as our population continued to grow over the last 7 years, we see ourselves getting younger. You might not tell by the color of my hair, but we are getting younger for the first time in my lifetime. And that has all been driven by really the public sector success that's happened in this province, and looking at how can government collaborate and support them as they continue to provide opportunities. Yes, make a profit, and we shouldn't be ashamed to say we want companies to make money and not hide from it, and we want them to do it here in Atlantic Canada. So I want to say thank you to the private sector who's worked extremely hard. Edward, when you brought into this, you talked about the pandemic, and I do want to just say a few words about that. I think one of the things that, I can speak for Nova Scotia, one of the things that we did very early on is we admitted what we didn't know. And for politicians, that's not always an easy place to be, but we acknowledged what we didn't know, and then we quickly shut down our parts of our economy where we were afraid that the virus was going to spread, till we started to learn lessons about how we can actually live with this virus and operate. So back in March, we shut down all the service sectors, bars, hotels, restaurants, hairdressing salons, all of the interfacing that happened on the medical side, whether it's physiotherapy, all of those things were closed for about 4 months in our province till we got an understanding of what this virus was like. And it allowed us to start opening up in early July with our handle on really a better understanding of how this virus is going to move within our province. Yes, we're lucky. The size of our population is one thing. We don't have a border with the United States. But really, the thing that I think has given us the greatest success here has been that the private sector bought in early. They understood this is going to be painful and going to hurt, but they were hoping by making quick and decisive action early on that they would be able to gradually open up, and that's what we're beginning to see in our economy. We're starting to see those businesses function as the vaccine starts to roll out. They're not functioning at full capacity, but we're operating. We've been doing that really since July. We were one of the first provinces in the country to put mandatory masking, where you couldn't go anywhere indoors in this province unless you were going to wear a mask. While Public Health Canada was saying that wasn't necessary, we made it a priority in our province, simply because we were trying to put confidence into the consumer and the business owners that we could open up and start moving some economic activity earlier, and we sustained it. In some parts, which didn't act as quickly and tried to make these changes as the economy was operating, not sure get the same buy-in from the consumer that we did here, simply because we just shut it down and then we gradually released it and opened it up. And at that point, people were looking forward to having some activity. We also did start at the rapid testing early on. Not a single rapid test that came from the national government collected dust in Nova Scotia. There was people would tell you, public health would tell you that they were not 100% accurate. That didn't really matter to us. We started to see in the second wave a run of asymptomatic people who were walking around their community not knowing what was happening, not knowing they were carrying the virus and they were spreading it. So these pop-up clinics that we started actually started picking up Nova Scotians who were feeling well, yet they were carrying the virus, and it helped us prevent the spread. And the other important thing that it's hard to measure when we started doing these pop-up clinics and asymptomatic testing was it gave Nova Scotians a chance to do something. It was really surprising. It's not why we started it, but it was surprising to watch the psyche of Nova Scotians want to go get tested because that's the only thing they could do. They wanted to help. And it became in some ways a community thing. You were seeing university campuses with huge numbers of 20 to 30-year-old people showing up to get tested because they wanted to be able to say they were part of this and they were helping. And it has allowed us just to really control those numbers. But I will say this to you, we don't have to look very far to recognize that it can all change in a heartbeat. So I've said this, the virus likes arrogance and ignorance. And, we don't have to look too far than south of the border what happens with ignorance. And one of the things that we have to make sure is that we don't get arrogant around dealing with this. And understanding acting quickly is critical and it matters. And I would say as we start rolling out the vaccine and we start moving ourselves back into some level of normal life, I think Atlantic Canada is positioned to come out of this very well. Heading into it in our province, we were very proud of the effort that we'd had. Our population was at an all-time high. And we're going to continue on our march to 1 million and beyond of people. But all the fundamentals were there. Our balance sheet will be negative this year, obviously, all of which can be traced back to the pandemic and the decisions that we made around some programs that were one time to support what was happening nationally. But also the fact that we've had some economic activity and businesses have been able to operate and potentially not make the kind of money they were prior to, but staying afloat, paying the bills, employing Nova Scotians was important. We need to stay confident in this deal between the Mi'kmaq community and Clearwater demonstrates to me what can happen in Atlantic Canada when you broadly look at the world and the opportunities that are in it. You can do it from here. Our exporting companies are healthy and ready to go once this vaccine rolls out. So I think in many ways, we on the east coast of Canada have a real opportunity to take advantage of what will come after the pandemic because of some of the earlier decisions that we made around trying to control this virus as we operated for periods of time. And I just want to end on this note, and I think since it's a public policy forum, we're watching how this virus has impacted so many parts of our life. There are two pieces that I think we need to continue to remind ourselves from a public policy point of view. Number one, as I watch globally and I looked at what's happening, whether it's related to Brexit or whether it's related to what's happening in the US, one of the things that I'm beyond proud of being a Nova Scotian is the way that Nova Scotians have embraced immigration. Leading up to the pandemic, it was, I think, probably the single biggest thing that allowed us to improve the economic health of our province. But more importantly, as this pandemic has unfolded, Nova Scotians have continued to wrap their arms around new people and wanting more people to come in. They recognize our collective success will depend on continuing to diversify our communities. And I think we've seen whenever something has happened, we don't have to look very far than the UK to watch what happened with Brexit. A lot of issues being pointed towards the fact that immigrants are moving into London, causing housing pricing and all those other things. We need to continue to, as public policy people, continue to talk about the importance of immigration to the country, but quite frankly to Atlantic Canada. I know Frank's talked about this a long time. You have an example in Atlantic Canada today, and that's called Nova Scotia, that can demonstrate to you growing your population is critical to creating job opportunities. Our population is at an all-time high, and our unemployment was at an all-time low coming into this pandemic. And then the other aspect of this that I think is something that people need to look at, and Atlantic Canada is a good example. Many of the deaths that have happened in our province happened at Northwood, which is the largest long-term care facility east of Montreal. And there are those and we've seen what's happened in other parts of Canada when it comes to long-term care. And there are those who suggest that all long-term care should be done in the public sector. I fundamentally believe that would be a huge mistake. And you can look here in Nova Scotia, and I think Atlantic Canada, we have some private long-term care operators who've demonstrated they can care for and should care for our loved ones. They are not only companies that are operating in Nova Scotia, but they do across the country. They have high quality care. And when we first ran into the issue around Northwood, it was the private sector communities that came to get private sector long-term care businesses that came and wrapped their arms around us and supported us. So from a public policy point of view, I think we need to continue to focus on immigration, continue to drive that, but equally as important around this pandemic, let's not lose sight of the fact this isn't either a public or private solution. The private sector has played an important role in caring for our parents and our grandparents in Nova Scotia, and they've done it with quality. And I look forward to joining that debate post this job or whatever when it comes to that, because I would stand next to the private sector long-term care facilities in this province. I'm sure there are public sector long-term care facilities doing work where they are, but as a region, we should not move away from that collaboration between the private and governments to provide that much needed care, and do it in a way that they've continued to do for, quite frankly, now decades in this province. And they were the ones that actually helped us quickly control that virus when it hit in any of our long-term care facilities. So thank you all very much. Chief Terry, one more time, congratulations. John, thank you for your work and beginning reconciliation. So thank you all very, very much. And I look forward to seeing you maybe on the golf course this summer, Chief Terry.
Thank you so much, Premier McNeil, for those remarks. It's been a pleasure working with your government over the last several years on immigration attraction and retention. When we began working together, there were 0 provinces that had growing populations in Atlantic Canada, and it's good to see the progress being made as we continue to do work with the 4 Atlantic provinces. And clearly no arrogance, no ignorance, humility and open-mindedness and evidence. And that's what I guess gets you the progress you have. I would just give you one caution that if you keep making speeches like that, you may get drafted back into political life. So you should be careful of that. But it was delightful to have you with us today, and good luck in your post-political career.
Thanks very much.
So before I turn over the mic to our host, Karina LeBlanc, PPF member and executive director of the Deschpondet Center, and our MC today, I just want to take a moment to congratulate our honorees, Senator Bernard and Penelope Rowe. Thank Frank McKenna for his unflagging support for the Public Policy Forum, and say how excited I am to be hearing from 2 past PPF honorees today, John Risley, one of the great business people of Atlantic Canada, and Chief Terry Paul, one of the great leaders of Indigenous peoples in this country. So Karina, the virtual platform is all yours.
Thanks so much, Ed, and good afternoon, everyone. I am delighted to be your host today, to be amongst the company of these distinguished guests and award recipients. Bonjour tout le monde, je m'appelle Karina Leblanc, je suis la directrice générale du Centre Deschpondet à l'Université du Nouveau-Brunswick, et c'est avec grand plaisir que je suis parmi vous cet après-midi. A quick reminder that this event is being recorded for those that may have just joined us. It will be available to the public via PPF's website and social media platforms. And as you might have noticed, we're also live streaming on Facebook. So welcome to the community of viewers from Facebook today. If you have any questions during the event, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Somebody will be monitoring the questions for you. And now, to start our next phase of our conversation this afternoon, I would like to turn the mic over to Kim Brooks. Kim is the Dean of the Faculty of Management and the Purdy Crawford Chair in Business Law at Dalhousie University. And Kim will be moderating the fireside chat that we're all waiting for with Chief Terrence Paul and John Risley. Over to you, Kim.
Thanks, Karina. So this is the fireside chat, and welcome. I've had a chance to talk to a few of my friends and colleagues across the country, and we could probably all use a good fire in the middle of February, so please pull up a chair. My job today is to get out of the room in some sense and turn the floor over to these iconic figures, Mr. Risley and Chief Paul, who are going to talk to us a little bit about how this deal came together. Maybe let me start by turning it to you, Chief Paul. Ed's described it as a historic deal. The Premier said it was transformational for the country. Can I ask you to kick us off by setting some of the context and telling us a little bit about the deal? And then to give you a heads up, Mr. Risley, I'm going to turn to you and ask you to take us back in time and tell us how it all got started.
All right. Thank you, Kim. From my perspective, anyway, the formal process took place to initiate the sale of the company, starting with John and Clearwater's ownership, working through RBC to implement a bid process. So an independent special committee was formed at Clearwater to begin the sale. From there, the bids that came through were taken to the committee. And I hear there was about, over 50 interested parties initially. And I think there was a screening process and they came down some. But on our end, for the Mi'kmaq Coalition, we began our processes to buy the company with hiring trusted consultants and advisors. And this is a team of lawyers and accountants. Today, they're my best friends, by the way. So, who we have strong working relationships with, very important. We built our team out of these advisors who have experience and relationships with our Mi'kmaq communities, and therefore shared our vision for the process. And through our work with them, we were able to find a strong business partner in Premium Bands of British Columbia. We are thrilled to be working with them. We also created a process to ensure that all Mi'kmaq communities in Nova Scotia and in Mi'kmaq in Newfoundland could choose to join the coalition that we formed. There was an outreach timeline, a presentation made to the communities, and then extensive follow-up to see who was interested in participating and who was not. And out of that, we got totally 7 Mi'kmaq communities joining the coalition.
Mr. Risley, I feel like that's a little bit of the current context. Maybe I can ask from your perspective, how did this all start?
So let me go way back if I can, Kim, and say that I first met Chief Paul Cheapers, I want to say 30 years ago, maybe a bit longer ago. At my age, you said tend to forget those kinds of numbers, and I remember being hugely impressed for a reason that he won't remember, and that was because at the day I met him, there was a community event at Membertou, his band, and the purpose of that event was to take interested band members through the financial statements of the community. And I frankly was blown away by that. I said, wow, what a cool thing to do to try to introduce financial literacy and a sense of ownership and disclosure and transparency around the financial affairs of an organization. I actually took that idea and tried to do the same thing in Dalhousie a few years later. But my point in describing that to you was that this was a symbol of leadership that I really admired and came to respect. And that led to us having I think a fairly close and very friendly business relationship over the years. We look to do various things with Membertou in particular and other Mi'kmaq bands. And then I think the sort of genesis of this deal really came about a couple of years ago when Chief Terry asked me to come and speak to an event that he was hosting for a whole group of First Nations communities in Membertou, and that the sort of subject of the event, I think, was their sort of, I think it was their fishing activity. Maybe it was more sort of general in nature. And I'm one of these guys that sort of shows up at the last minute and not having sort of prepared any remarks, and I sort of tend to think about what I'm going to say 5 minutes before I say it, which can get you in trouble. So on this occasion, I remember thinking that, you know, look, we are guilty as a broader community of paying lip service to the relationship between the business community and our First Nations across the country, right? And we're polite and respectful, but there isn't a lot of substance beyond that. And as I spoke, I remember saying, you know, look, what we do, and we were doing this as a company, was yes, we would hire people from both Aboriginal and First Nations communities, and inevitably they would end up as deckhands on vessels. And there's nothing wrong with that. Those are good jobs. They do extremely well. But there was really no thought given to what the real opportunity was. And I remember saying in those remarks, why don't we have people from the First Nations communities in our sales offices in Asia, in the United States, and Europe? Why don't we have them training as engineers? Because we're desperately short of engineers. Why don't we have them as people with graduate degrees in food hygiene, working in our quality control labs? Why don't we have them as captains on our vessels? And why don't we have them in the management positions of our business? And we really need to think about how we're going to accomplish that if we're really serious about bringing the two nations together and really serious about reconciliation. And I think I acknowledged at that time that, you know, this is not going to happen overnight. This is going to take time, but we're committed to try to make that happen as sort of a single entity, if you like. And then as we began to think about the sale of Clearwater, I invited Chief Terry to come and have dinner at my house in Halifax, and we actually invited some representatives of the Inuit community as well to talk about the subject of them getting involved in the process of the sale of Clearwater. And that's really sort of the background that, and I'm sorry to have gone on so long, but that's sort of the background that then led to the process that Chief Terry has described.
So let me ask a follow-up from that, Mr. Risley. So you picked up on something I think that the Premier mentioned around getting more members of the Mi'kmaq Nation into the boardroom and advancing Indigenous voices and kind of corporate roles. And I know, Chief Paul, I mean, there was this story about you starting work around financial literacy in Membertou. Can you talk to us a little bit, Chief Paul, about how you see the importance of this deal in terms of what it means for First Nations peoples across Canada, what it means for your own community?
Yeah, Kim, to us, you know, in Membertou, this is a transformational deal, as has been mentioned here. I think the Premier mentioned that. It truly is. And it's really important and monumental for a number of reasons, many reasons, you know, and I'll give you a few. You know, one, you know, it provides ownership and access, you know, to the Mi'kmaq where we never had this before. We never had that opportunity or chance to be out in the offshore. And as we all know, fishing is a traditional activity for, you know, and it's an honor practice by the Mi'kmaq. You know, I read somewhere where the explorer Nicholas Denny, I think back in the 18th or 17th century, you know, indicating his relationship with the Mi'kmaq. And he noted that we spent 90% of our time in the water. So fishing has been a very, very important part of Mi'kmaq life and culture. So we are able to move forward and reap these economic benefits from an industry that we know and we respect. And people don't realize how monumental it is to be able to get 7 Mi'kmaq communities to think together and go in the same direction. But we were able to do that, and we're able to flow these benefits to our people from across the Atlantic for not only for employment, but access to others, like as John said, and I say right from the deckhand to the CEO someday, but provided that we're qualified, and we want to make sure that they are qualified to be able to apply for these positions when they become available. This is also an example of how nation-to-nation partnerships not only work, but they can flourish. This is a model for the future on how Indigenous groups can not only have a seat at the big industry tables, but we can own that table too. And we're getting there.
So this is a deal that has received a lot of attention in Canada, but it's been covered by The Guardian. I mean, it's received world attention as well. Mr. Risley, I know you started the business sort of iconically out of the back of a truck. How does it feel for you at this moment? Do you have aspirations or hopes for where things will go for the business from here? What would you say to Chief Paul as this transition occurs in terms of the advice you might have from your long experience in the business?
We've had a number of conversations on the subject, Kim. First of all, as we thought about the future ownership of the business, we did not want the business to end up in the hands of a purely sort of a transaction-oriented financial player who was going to come in and work some magic over the course of 3 or 4 years and then sell it on to somebody else. That was not what we saw as being a good home for the business. So we sort of had some philosophical conversations, if you like, about the future. And I expressed to Chief Paul the importance of continuing the company's growth. If you're going to attract good people, you've got to offer them the opportunity to grow themselves. And that means a growing enterprise that they're coming to work for. Much of that growth can come from outside of Canada. We serve customers around the world. Customers don't want just seafood from Atlantic Canada. They want it from different species from all over. And if we're going to add value to and create meaningful relationships for our customers and help them become more profitable in their own right, then we've got to take on a greater role, if you like, in terms of providing them with good quality product from all over. So we've done a lot of growing in South America and in the UK, and we impressed upon Chief Paul the importance of that. We impressed on him the importance of good governance, of having good people around the board of directors, and providing discipline to management. And look, I can't say that I anything other than I tip my hat to the Mi'kmaq leaders who were involved here, because it's one thing to say that, and it's another thing to be listened to. And I can say in this case that that those words, if you like, which were meant with nothing other than good intent, were listened to. So how do we feel? We feel like the company is in good hands. We're delighted. We could not be more happy about this outcome. We told all the bidders during the process that we wanted to see them partner with the First Nations Coalition, that would be a big factor, if you like, in our decision as to where the business went. Some chose to, some chose not to. Others thought that money was more important than that. So do I feel like the business is in good hands, and do I feel like it's found an owner who is going to curate it, if you like, for literally hundreds of years to come? Yes, this is a collection of fishing licenses and quotas that you couldn't, if it wouldn't matter how much money you had today, you could not set out to acquire again. And we were very lucky, and we acknowledge our luck in being sort of around at the right time and being in a position where we could sort of put this collection of licenses together under the umbrella of what became Clearwater. And it was very important to us that it not be broken up and that it find its way into good hands who would appreciate, if you like, the value of what this can do for, and remember, this is a sustainable resource, right? You look after this resource and it will be there for hundreds and hundreds of years. And we've always taken that responsibility very seriously. And I feel sure that our new owners will take that responsibility every bit as seriously.
So we've talked a bit about the deal between the intimate parties to it. Let me shift a bit because we're here talking as part of this panel at the Public Policy Forum to ask a bit about the other actors who are involved, right? So this was a deal that involved lots of government actors. It involved, broader community consultations. What are the lessons that we could learn from a deal of this size coming through a province like Nova Scotia, and some of the complexities you had to navigate to get it done? What can we take away from this deal that will help future deals?
Patience. I'll say that. It takes a lot of patience. Chief Chair and I think, had that first dinner together when we talked about this. I think I'm right, Chief, in saying in October of 1999, so several months before the pandemic. And so it took a long time to put it together. But look, Rome wasn't built overnight. And so I would say the first thing, if you're going to do these things, you need to take your time. And the more thought you put into crafting it, the more likely it is to work and last.
Yeah, I certainly would agree. I'm pretty sure I spoke to John in 1999, but I think about this deal was 2019.
2019,
and,
sorry, yes.
But we did talk even before 99, really, and I say that for more than 20 years, probably 25 years, Membertou has had a relationship with Clearwater Seafoods. And many years ago, I met the owners. I met John, and even though there are times when our opinions and interests were not exactly on the same page, there was always mutual respect. And, and upon getting to know one another, it became clear, that we had the same mindset and interest when it comes to the fishing industry, and it was driven by science. We both agreed that science has to rule the day here before we dip anything in the water. And once we're able to get together on that point, we've had wonderful working relationships. We've had several smaller deals before this, and they're working out very well. And that's the Arctic surf clam, and also the 2 offshore lobster license that Membertou itself purchased. And this deal went on before this major acquisition. So over the past number of years, we worked very well with Clearwater, the board, and the staff, and which led us, I think, this relationship. And I say that, good relationship has to come first before we move on. And I feel that we established that very well, and that led us to this major acquisition. And I feel very honored that John and his partners, believed in us, that we were going to keep this company together, and keep the same standards and work hard to expand it globally.
So we've got some questions from people watching. Let me build from what you said, Chief Paul, and ask one of them, which is to ask you to speak a bit about the impact of this business transaction on the relationship between non-Indigenous fishers and Indigenous fishers, and that kind of reconciliation question, I think, in some ways, that the Premier also put on the table at the start of the panel today.
Well, from the feedback I got from across the country and the world, really, I've had interviews with newscasters in Spain, in Netherlands, the UK, in the United States, and being asked to be a keynote speaker on some subjects that I don't know anything about, but I've been asked across the country, particularly Aboriginal groups, and I've taken a lot of them in to do that, to spread the word. To me, and the feedback I got, particularly Indigenous people, Indigenous students that are going for their doctorates and that, and they're just absolutely blown away by this deal. It's the biggest deal in this country, biggest deal for Indigenous people. And I hope this is just the beginning of these type of acquisitions for Indigenous people across the country, because we have access to capital finally, and we want to utilize it the best way we can by doing deals like this.
So there's a couple of questions that are just about the nuts and bolts of the deal. Maybe I'll ask a couple of those to get you to jump in on them. So what's the % of voting shares that the Mi'kmaq will hold in the deal, and where did the funds come from?
Well, we're 50% owners with our partner, Premium Brands. We looked into Premium Brands. We had a number of interested parties approach us, the Mi'kmaq, and in the beginning, we wanted a pathway, a clear pathway on how we'll end up with 100% of the ownership of the company. Most all the prospective partners walked away, including the one we have now, Premium Brand, because of our insistence on what we were looking for. We would even start at maybe 10% or whatever, but somewhere, there needs to be a path to own 100%. They all walked, and Premium Brands came back and did a counter offer with us they explained to us too that when they acquire businesses, actually they don't acquire the business, they acquire the management, and they're in there for the long term, very long term. And we have told them that we're here to fish until the rest of time. So that's pretty long, So we felt good about what they said about a long time. I guess their long times is like 30 years or so, so that seems good to us. And if they ever want to sell, that we would have the first offer. So we accepted that 50-50. We also own the quotas, the Mi'kmaqs, and that we own 50% of the company. We invested $250 million, which we were able to get the financing from the Indigenous organization that's based in British Columbia called the First Nations Finance Authority. And in order for Indigenous community to qualify for borrowing status, that you have to be financially certified by the Financial Management Board, who oversees the lending activities of the FNFA. So it's a godsend to be able to get that capital. It is private capital. I believe it's patients capital, that where people are willing to invest in a lending agency, which is very competitive, has really good rating. In fact, it has a double, triple A rating. So there is patients capital that's willing to invest in that, and the terms and the rates are very, very competitive, and we wouldn't have been able to do this without them.
So let me jump in from there, because there's an interesting question about, do you have to have a robust economic development arm like Membertou does to be able to arrange a deal of this type? And you've talked a little bit about some of the complexities around financing and the need for substantial capital. Is this an atypical kind of deal going forward, do you think, or do you think there will be we'll see more of these kinds of transactions? Is there something unique about the magnitude of having this many groups come together to make the acquisition?
Well, I hope the only uniqueness is that we're just the first to be able to do this kind of acquisition. I hope, and I like to be part of that, where we're able to accomplish that, where we're able to help other First Nations in this country to look at and be able to make similar type acquisitions.
So we've got a question about government approvals. Was it tough to get approvals of the offshore licenses that Clearwater holds in terms of this transaction? What kinds of frictions did you experience in terms of that regulatory apparatus?
Well, I guess first they themselves were stunned that this acquisition came about. Very weren't expecting it at all. We've had a good relationship with the government. We didn't have any issues with our other acquisitions in the offshore. We don't expect any issue with this. We're dealing with it through, we know that the government has to go through a number of processes in order for this to occur, but we don't expect any hiccups on this.
So you're the incoming folks, Chief Paul. So the questions are obviously coming in a little bit more strongly here for you, but let me ask another one, and then I'm going to turn and ask Mr. Risley, put Mr. Risley on the spot for a minute. But can you talk a bit about how profits or revenue generated from Clearwater's operations will benefit Indigenous communities? And do you see opportunities to use an Indigenous branding strategy to open up new markets?
We certainly want to make, we certainly want to make sure that the company is very stable and that it is in a position to be able to grow and acquire other companies that are in the fishing industry. So we want to make sure that the companies run very well, and whatever capital would have the interests of the company first. But in our case, like many Indigenous communities, like we operate in a way that is like profit for nonprofit. And that is that we utilize our profit to do a lot of community projects. We supplement a lot of our activities here in Membertou in a number of areas. For example, like housing, with the activities that we do and the own source revenues that we're able to earn helps us make our own decisions on on housing, the future housing needs of Membertou, for example, but other education too. Very, very, very one of our greatest pillars in Membertou is the educating of our people, all our people, to ensure that they get the best opportunities that they get when they grow into adulthood. And I feel that this acquisition helps our children to think better about the future, and that they do have a future.
All right, Mr. Risley, I said I'd put you on the spot. So, I mean, you've been a founder of an incredible company that has kind of had global reach, but had a seat in the Atlantic region and in Nova Scotia in particular, and your relationship to it is shifting now. Can you talk a little bit about how that feels and how you want this to be seen in terms of one of the legacy contributions you've made as part of your business activities in the region?
Yeah, so I'm a guy that likes to go sort of from the frying pan into the fire. So I'm still in the fire and too stupid to get myself out. So there'll be we're working on we'll continue to work on other business opportunities. Look, I think the great thing about this business has been the extent to which we were able to take a very fragmented industry and build a global player in that business, add value to Nova Scotian exports, build a brand name that's very much enshrined in the Nova Scotian ethic. Many folks on this call will not be aware that Nova Scotia had back a couple of hundred years ago the second largest commercial trading vessel fleet in the world. And so the sea runs deep in our roots, as it does in the roots of our Indigenous partners. And and I grew up by the sea, and I couldn't imagine not sort of always living by it. And so it was really fun and exciting for me and our folks and our team to build a business that enjoys this kind of global reputation. And as I said earlier, I feel very happy that it's in good hands. We couldn't be more happy about this outcome, frankly. And I can honestly say that it was not about in the end trying to get the most money. It was about trying to find the right home for the business, and we found that home.
So I know I'm going to turn this conversation shortly over to my colleague, Laurel Broughton. So I just to set her up nicely, maybe I'll ask you to talk a little bit more about the global piece, the export piece. What's the importance of that for this business and for the Atlantic region?
It's the Premier talked earlier about the importance of Nova Scotia growing its economy, and if you think about sort of the last 50 years when I began my business career, to start a business anywhere, frankly, in Atlantic Canada, you looked within Atlantic Canada for your customer base, and by definition, the size of your business would be a function of the size of that market inside Atlantic Canada. That's how we thought, right? And it's great to see that the region has now grown beyond that. And I keep telling people that my hope for Nova Scotia and my hope for this region is resonant in the number of new companies that we are spawning. It's the ecosystem has come alive. The province has played a big role in supporting the growth of that ecosystem. And all these businesses are not focused on markets in Nova Scotia or markets in Atlantic Canada or markets in Canada. They're focused on global markets. And you may not like what globalization has done, but globalization is here to stay because consumers want the best quality products at the least possible price. And if you're going to grow a business, you've got to be able to compete on a global stage. And all these businesses that are coming through our ecosystem at the moment have their focus on global market opportunities. And that is, I can't tell you how enormously important that is for the future of Nova Scotia and what a good position it puts the province in.
Chief Paul, there's quite a generous question in there about what can we do to be helpful? What do you think you're going to need in the coming years?
Certainly want to work well with the industry, for sure. We're a very big player in the industry now, and I'm always like wanting to help move everybody, rise with the tide, and everybody benefits. And we want to work very closely with the inshore industry to ensure that to let them know that we're not a threat. We want to be a partner. We want to be able to benefit, and everybody benefit as much as possible in the outside market that's available there, and grow that market. That's where I want to go.
Okay, I'm going to use this as a very nice closing comment, Chief Paul, to have everyone benefit. That's a nice note, I think, to end our conversation. Let me thank both of you so much for your hard work to bring this deal to fruition and for sharing your insights about the process with us today.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Kim.